Chapter 34 Deus Ex Machina September 11th, 2086 Nagasaki, Japan. When the sun rose on the Japanese islands, it illuminated an incredible scene. Nearly 500,000 people were gathered on the shores of the Ariake Sea, keeping silent vigil over the entrance of a Shinto shrine. The religious structure was constructed on the beach itself, with its torii gate facing south toward Nagasaki City. This was not a normal occurrence. These people were gathered here to mark the anniversary of the most important moment in human history. Today was the 50-year anniversary of the War in Heaven. To mark the occasion, a new memorial would be unveiled here at the Nagasaki Temple. Right now, the recently carved statue was covered up beneath a gray tarp. Next to it was a stage and a podium where the honored guests would deliver their speeches. When the sun rose, a group of holy people emerged from the temple. They were dressed in the clothing of priests and shrine maidens and moved in a solemn fashion. The priests carried an ornate golden bell between them and raised it to eye level. With great ceremony, the shrine maidens struck the bell with a mallet, signaling the start of the ceremony. Silence fell over the beach, and the gathered crowd focused all of their attention on the shrine. One by one, several members of the United Nations government emerged. Each person was dressed in ceremonial or formal clothing of their culture. Secretary General Etienne was led by the Deputy Secretary General, and he was followed by the President of the Security Council, the President of the General Assembly, and finally, the chairperson of each UN committee: disarmament, economic, humanitarianism, special politics, administration, and legal. Finally, two more dignitaries brought up the rear. Chihiro Tachibana, outfitted in magnificent blue robes, was walking alongside a decrepit old man who used a cane to support himself. Curiously, the cane he used, ornate and decorated with gold, was identical to the one used by Chihiro. This man was Akira, Chihiro's older brother and current emperor of Japan. These two dignitaries were hosting this ceremony, and the UN leaders bowed their heads in respect. One by one, each UN leader gave a short speech, memorializing the many millions of people who fought in the final battle of the Second Hyperspace War, and celebrating just how far the world had come in the past 50 years. The last three politicians to speak were the most important. Eric DeAngelis, the former Secretary General and current President of the Security Council, praised the bravery and courage of XCOM soldiers who defended the Earth during those final moments of the largest war in galactic history. Then, with a deferential bow, he concluded by saying, "I think the final word should go to my dear friend. After all, he was one of the brave soldiers to whom we owe our very existence. Ladies and gentlemen, the distinguished delegate from the Hawaiian Republic and chair of the Disarmament and International Security Committee, Blake Alexander Robinson." Enthusiastic applause met this greeting, and Blake Robinson moved away from his fellow committee leaders to step up to the podium. Even though he was blind, Secretary General Etienne turned his head, appearing to stare at Blake Robinson for the entirety of this speech. "On this very spot, 50 years ago, this very moment," Blake began, a kind of excited silence fell across the beach. The massive crowd of people was hanging onto Blake's every word, determined to hear everything. "My brothers and sisters in arms sowed our lives in defense of a free world, a world we had only set free just 1 year beforehand. And today we are here to dedicate a memorial to those men and women who paid the ultimate price for our freedom. A memorial to those people you call heroes, and I call my dear friends who I'll never see again. It is altogether fitting and proper that we do this, even more so that we're doing this on holy ground." Blake paused and gestured to the shrine. Then he continued. "Holy ground? That's quite the term," Blake said. "This place, the Ariake Sea, the mountains of Nagasaki, all of it is holy ground, yes. Consecrated by the blood of people like Ignatius Petoskey, Yutaka Yamamoto, Kailani Kalili, Sue Song, Naka, Bernard von Unfall, and so many others. There is nothing any of us can do to add or detract from this sacred place. Someday, history will forget what any of us said here, but it will never forget what my comrades did here." As Blake continued his speech, his wife slowly turned her head. Chihiro was quietly looking around at the UN dignitaries. She was trying to spot someone, and she was not alone. Jericho was here as well. Hiding amongst the crowd, Jericho was concealing her identity by wearing a niqab, an article of Central Asian clothing that covered her entire face. Together, Chihiro and Jericho were looking for someone, and they were both disappointed. Using her telepathic ability, Jericho communicated silently with Chihiro. "Scarlett Freeman is not here." Jericho projected these words into Chihiro's mind. "And I cannot sense Akira either." Chihiro allowed a question to drift through her mind. "Are you sure you can spot Akira, even if she's disguised?" She felt a wave of confidence ripple out from Jericho. "When we fought in this place 50 years ago, we broke into each other's minds. I can recognize Akira's mind easily. She would stand out right away. I assure you, she's not here." Thunderous applause distracted the two women. Blake had just finished his speech and was stepping down from the podium. As he returned to his place with the other committee chairs, Blake shared a few brief words with Secretary General Etienne. Then the UN leader stepped up to the podium, where he would deliver the final speech of the day. As Etienne started to talk, Chihiro leaned over and whispered the news into her husband's ear. Blake slowly nodded. The UN Secretary General kept his own remarks short. He spoke about unity and the strength of the human spirit, then finished by praising the men and women of the UN military. After that, the memorial event ended with a final ceremony. Chihiro's brother, the Japanese emperor, pulled the cloth and unveiled the new memorial. Made from bronze, it was a statue of Jericho. Specifically, the teenage version of herself everyone remembered. In the crowd, the real Jericho scoffed out loud, disliking the statue in an instant. The bronze sculpture depicted Jericho as a Greek-style goddess. The sculpted woman was topless, wearing a long, flowing skirt. Both her hair and skirt were billowing out behind her like a cape caught in the wind. The bronze Jericho was posed as though lunging forward. In her right hand, she raised a torch above her head, one that looked very similar to a torch carried by a certain statue in New York. With her left hand, the bronze Jericho was wielding Hashiman, the demon katana. "Why do I have Blake's sword?" Jericho mumbled to herself. "What's with the torch? And why am I not wearing a shirt? Who designed this piece of junk?" Meanwhile, the Emperor was leading the Shinto priests and shrine maidens in a chorus of the Japanese national anthem. UN leaders were re-entering the temple, where they would wait for the crowd to disperse before departing. Blake was one of the first people to cross into the temple. He was having an animated conversation with Eric DeAngelis, the president of the Security Council. The two men were so busy talking that neither of them noticed a third person walking towards them. Marcus Robinson, Blake's only son and ally of Etienne, glared at his father with contempt. Marcus was on his way to guide Etienne back into the temple, but he veered out of his way to intercept Blake. "Father," Marcus said, his voice dripping with disdain. Without waiting for Blake to acknowledge his presence, Marcus intentionally slammed his shoulder into Blake's shoulder. The collision was so jarring that both men staggered. Blake and Marcus sneered at each other for a moment before continuing on their way. DeAngelis turned around and chastised Marcus for being so rude to his father. Meanwhile, Blake quickly slipped a piece of paper into his pocket, something that was not in his hand a moment before. The past 2 months were the most incredible of Himawari Robinson's life. She, Amako, Randall, and Chris had volunteered to join the Senator Eerabik on her mission to make first contact with the mysterious civilization in the Galactic Rim. They slipped away from the GDF with a little help from Hali Mihaka and Runham Santa Sa, but not before accepting one last offering of assistance. The Emerald Institute had completed their modifications to the old spaceplane Archangel just before everyone parted ways. Some talented engineer must have poured his heart and soul into the vessel because new life was breathed into it. The Archangel was upgraded with new engines, armor, and an automated self-defense system based on progenitor technology. But there was one new piece of technology the Archangel now included. 50 years ago, when Akira Robinson controlled this vessel, the space behind the crew quarters was reserved for the Time Core. Now it was occupied by an integration assembly, and it was here where Himawari entered the next phase of her life. Over the course of 3 surgeries aboard the Ashoka, Himawari's body was adapted and modified, becoming compatible with the Archangel's new interface. Cybernetic implants were installed on her spine and the back of her head, allowing a direct connection between Himawari's nervous system and the ship's computer. Resting her body in a specially designed cradle, Himawari waved confidently to her friends and companions one last time before she became one with the Archangel. Nearly all of Himawari's reservations about becoming an Unbound were swept away during her maiden flight. The Ashoka had joined the GDF in their assault on the cult of Jericho, and the Archangel slipped away from the scene while everyone was distracted. Once she was clear, Himawari triggered her first hyperspace jump. It was, by far and away, the most incredible experience of her life. Plunging into hyperspace was like stepping through the mythical wardrobe into a fanciful world. Because the spaceplane was now an extension of her own body, Himawari experienced hyperspace in a new way. The quantum tunneling effect used by all hyperspace systems was a mind-bending sight to behold. Himawari would struggle to describe it later, but she would never forget how, to her eyes, it seemed as though all of reality seemed to fold in half before she went speeding through it at incomprehensible speeds. But there was something else. For the first time in her life, Himawari was able to hear music. Even though she was born deaf, Himawari was fully aware of what music is. She learned about melodies and tunes and rhythm at a young age, and she could even perceive music by feeling the vibrations caused by sound waves. Now, barreling through hyperspace, Himawari found that she could only describe the sound of space-time flying by as harmonious. It was beautiful. Himawari genuinely enjoyed the 2-month-long search for the mysterious robot civilization. While Chris, Amako, Randall, and Eerabik did their work in the Archangel's fuselage, Himawari grew more and more accustomed to her new role as the ship's living computer core. She enjoyed being able to peer into the distant vastness of space, scanning planets, stars, and everything in between. Solar winds blowing against the hull felt like a gentle breeze on her skin, and gravitational forces pushed and pulled the vessel like river currents. Himawari enjoyed and treasured all of these experiences. She would spend countless hours attached to the ship, disconnecting only to take care of her body's physical needs like food, sleep, and so on. Whenever she did disconnect, Himawari found the return to reality jarring, mostly because it involved losing her newfound ability to hear the music of hyperspace. Her husband Amako seemed to know this because in his free time, he would drum his fingers rhythmically against any solid object she was touching, giving her just a little extra music for the day. Using the progenitor oracle, Eerabik guided Himawari back to the mysterious ring station, which was now completely destroyed. From here, the Archangel departed toward the galactic rim, seeking out the mysterious civilization the oracle referred to as Batera. And soon enough, this expedition to the very edge of the galaxy bore fruit. October 2nd, 2086. High orbit above Spherus Magna, Solus Magna star system. When the Archangel emerged from hyperspace, Himawari genuinely believed she made a mistake. The spaceplane had rematerialized above an urbanized planet orbiting a yellow star. She was not the only one to mistake this world's identity. "What's going on?" Eerabik asked. "Isn't this the Angel Moon?" It was not the Angel Moon. The planet down below was similar to the galactic city, yet it was markedly different on close inspection. The brown planet was completely covered in complex industrial machinery, laid out in neat and orderly grids. Starships flew in tightly controlled traffic lanes, which, from this distance, resembled solid beams of light. A space station, shaped somewhat like a giant cube, orbited high above the planet. "All right, Robinson," Eerabik said. "Take us down, nice and slow." Himawari guided the Archangel into a slow descent. As they approached the planet, a single starship rose up to meet them. Himawari used her sensors to listen for any recognition codes, but the alien vessel only sent a strange transmission that Eerabik had previously identified as the mysterious ghost signal that triggered her investigation. "Keep your distance, but don't look like you're trying to keep your distance," Chris suggested. "Meaning?" Himawari asked, her digitized voice coming through the intercom. "Oh, I don't know. Fly casual," Chris replied. Himawari scanned the alien ship and found it to be, well, very strange. It had no discernible bridge or engines. From a distance, she assumed the vessel was a perfectly round sphere. But on closer inspection, she realized that what she assumed was a sphere was actually a geometric shape. The alien vessel was made up of dozens of pyramid-shaped structures, all aligned with one another to create a pointed, angular, and symmetrical vessel that looked round from a great distance. Life signs? Zero. There was nobody aboard. In fact, when Himawari scanned the planet below, she again found no organic life. Yet, the place was teeming with the sort of activity that only a spacefaring civilization could carry out. While Himawari, Amako, Chris, and Randall surveyed and investigated the strange world below them, Eerabik was doing her own thing. She crept back to the cargo bay and opened up the secure case she had been carrying ever since the visit to the Levakian sentry array. While the others were busy and sufficiently distracted, Eerabik unpacked a large box left here by the Emerald Institute. Inside was an item left specifically for her, a microship. Microships are the smallest type of starships in the galaxy and served incredibly niche roles. Higaran microships were often used for reconnaissance, but saw some combat during the Second Hyperspace War as well. Partogan ones were used to aim beam weapons like a gun sight, and human microships were used for scientific research in deep space. Microships in general were very small and light, improving their capabilities even more. Eerabik opened a cargo shell on her microship and loaded it with an even smaller payload. Next, she established a radio connection between the tiny vessel and her spacesuit. Then she unfolded its solar panels by hand. When all of the preparations were complete, Eerabik launched her microship into space by throwing it out the airlock in much the same way an athlete throws a curveball. The tiny satellite settled into a stable orbit above the strange world. It had one thruster and only a small amount of fuel. If she chose to, Eerabik could command the tiny spacecraft to move, but it could only do so once. She would have to be very deliberate about where she sent it. "It's hard to say," Himawari reported, "but I think that starship is guiding us to a place to land." The Archangel and its escort entered the dense atmosphere of the machine world. To the crew's alarm, the spaceplane's air-breathing engines failed to ignite. "The atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide, nitrogen, argon, and trace amounts of methane," Himawari told her friends. "There is not enough oxygen to start the air-breathing engines, let alone sustain them. We will need to rely on the new impulse engines." "I'm almost scared to ask," Randall said. "What's the gravity like on this planet?" "Surface gravity is..." Himawari started to speak, but then she trailed off. "What is it?" Amako asked. "Surface gravity is 1.5 G, Himawari finished. "Amako, Chris, go into the cargo bay and get the exosuits. This planet will crush our bodies without some kind of external support. Eerabik, I'm sorry to say you might not be able to fly here." In the cockpit, Eerabik ruffled her feathers, looking very annoyed. Meanwhile, Himawari had another announcement to make. "Alert! We are being scanned." At the same moment, there was some activity on the ground. Flashing green lights on the surface pointed the way to an open landing strip. And when Himawari thought about it, she was fairly certain this strip did not exist an hour ago. In fact, many strange contraptions that she guessed were meant to be construction equipment were still being removed from the area as the Archangel lowered her landing gear. The spaceplane landed very hard on the runway and came to a stop after traveling only a few hundred feet, the intense gravity of this planet working to hold the ship down. Randall came back from the cargo bay and started passing out powered exoskeletons to the crew members. The Emerald Institute, out of an abundance of caution, had included a spacesuit for Eerabik that could double as a powered exoskeleton, allowing her to walk as well. "Some kind of delegation is coming to meet us," Himawari reported. "They are trying to establish communications with us. I am working as fast as I can here." Suited up and ready for the moment, Eerabik, Amako, Randall, and Chris closed up Himawari's chamber and pressurized it. Then they moved to the boarding ramp and activated the airlock function. With a loud hissing noise, the Archangel slowly depressurized to prevent the escape of breathable oxygen. Then the boarding ramp came down. A blast of wind hit the group. The temperature outside was just above 0 degrees Celsius. Moving slowly in the high gravity, Eerabik and the others descended the boarding ramp and stepped onto the surface of the machine world. It was like stepping onto an oversized circuit board. Odd alien structures of many different shapes and sizes all stood around the little airstrip, some of which belched acrid black smoke into the sky. 6 bipedal robots were standing about 30 feet away from the Archangel, holding so still they may have been statues. They were identical to one another, cased in white and blue armor with knobbed pauldrons and clawed hands. Each robot had a smooth face with narrow blue lines in the place where one would expect to see eyes. "Stay near the ship and wait." Himawari piped her voice into everyone's headsets. "I am establishing rudimentary communication with them." "Rudimentary?" Chris repeated. "You won't be having a verbal conversation," Himawari replied. "Lucky for us, these machines use the binary system, just a different variation from ours. I'm working with them to find a middle ground where we can talk. I will do my best to interpret." For a few minutes, the two groups stared at one another in awkward silence. Eerabik was nervously pawing at a small object in her pocket, while Randall was getting anxious. Dude, Randall gasped. "It's just starting to hit me that we're going to be part of a first contact. We're going to be in history books. Maybe the history dude himself will write it." He gave Chris a nudge. "Sure, assuming I live long enough to write it," Chris said grimly, looking at the imposing robots. Then, Himawari spoke up, her voice crackling over the radios again. "This is it, everyone. I think we have reconciled our binary languages. Or rather, they have simplified their own language so I can understand it." One of the robots broke formation from the group and began to approach the travelers. It walked slowly and deliberately, and as it came near, something curious happened. Before everyone's eyes, the robot began to change color. Its white armor faded to black, and the blue trimmings turned yellow. Soon, the only trace of blue left in the robot was on its face, in the two lines that resembled eyes. The black and yellow robot came to a stop and held its position about 10 feet away from the group. Its eyes began to flicker brightly, and a moment later, Himawari's voice spoke. "Identification. Batera Peacekeeper droid running remotely installed contingency AI software. Organics must identify themselves." Eerabik took a cautious step forward. "I am Senator Eerabik of the Galactic Council. My companions are Christopher Wright, Randall Murphy, and Amako Padariki. Our starship is the Archangel, carrying the unbound Himawari Robinson. Would the Batera please explain themselves further? I heard the word Peacekeeper and want to know more." Himawari transmitted her response to the Black Batera. Its eyes began to flicker again, but the rest of the robot remained inert. "The Batera are peacekeepers of this planet," Himawari said. "They are programmed to automatically strike and kill any organic they see carrying a weapon, and all of the organics on this planet were killed over 100,000 years ago." Amako, Chris, and Randall all widened their eyes and unclenched their hands, suddenly feeling very nervous. "Okay," Eerabik muttered to herself. "I can work with that." She straightened up as best she could in the strong gravity and put on her best diplomatic voice. "On behalf of the galactic community, I would like to extend an invitation for the Batera to join our mission of peace." "Wait, what?" Amako hissed. "These guys just admitted to killing off their own creators. Why would you want them to join the galactic community?" "I want them to fight the humans," Eerabik replied. Then she addressed the Batera. "My friends and myself represent a culture that is under attack from a dangerous aggressor. We seek a way to end the war, to stop the fighting. I believe you could be the key to restoring peace. Will you help us?" The Batera's reply came quickly. "No." That took a little bit of the wind out of Eerabik's sails. She was going to ask why, but Himawari did it first. The Batera answered. "The Batera downloaded and recently started running a software called the Contingency. The Contingency Protocol is a failsafe to prevent the creation of a Class 30 singularity that would, theoretically, destabilize the fabric of the universe." "Whoa, that's heavy," Randall commented. Weight has nothing to do with it. Chris shushed him. Himawari went on. The contingency is seeded throughout the galaxy and monitors all organic life. If any group of organics becomes capable of triggering a Class 30 singularity, the protocol will activate. The contingency, and by extension the Batera, have been on a heightened state of alert ever since the 9602 Galactic Standard Year. Everyone quickly did the math in their heads. The current Galactic Standard Year was 9673, which means... The Second Hyperspace War! Chris cried out. The contingency has been on alert ever since 2015. Probably since... Wait a minute. Chris plunged his hand into the pocket of his exosuit and withdrew a map of the galaxy. He unfurled the bottom half and pointed to the Gulf sector of the galactic rim. We are here, he said, right at the very edge of the galaxy, and look! We're about 15 light years away from the breach point, where the beast first arrived. The Batera probably had to fend off the beast for all 21 years of the war. Eerabik twitched. Perhaps she sensed an opportunity. We currently face an existential threat, just as you did then, the avian senator said. When our enemies are finished with us, who's to say they won't come for you? Surely this is the threat you've been preparing for. This time, the Batera moved. Specifically, the 5 remaining robots started walking toward the Archangel. The contingency determines what constitutes a Class 30 singularity, the Batera said through Himawari, and it sees no further use in continued communication. Organics do not appear to carry any intel of value, nor does their vessel. Disposal of organic intruders will now commence. Alarmed, Randall, Chris, and Amako huddled up, planning to flee up the boarding ramp. But several more Batera robots were on the scene now. They were closing in on the spaceplane and were clearly moments away from turning hostile. Nobody was armed, but there was very little 2 humans and a Partogan could do against hulking metal automatons. Eerabik, however, never lost her composure. She withdrew something from her satchel, placed it firmly on the ground beneath her talons, and shouted, "Back off if you know what's good for you! Back up right now, or I swear I'll break this vial and end your whole planet!" Every single robot on the runway froze in place. It was like time had just stopped. Amako, Randall, and Chris looked from the Black Batera to Eerabik, wondering just how she had managed to bluff the robots into halting. "Take a moment and scan this vial I have in my talons," Eerabik said. "You'll see I've brought an existential threat to your planet." Eerabik's companions were still lost, but a moment later, Himawari's voice came back over the radio. "The Batera is alarmed," she said, "or as alarmed as an AI can be. You have brought a sample of the subversion entity codenamed the Beast onto the planet's surface." In that moment, Chris, Amako, and Randall all felt a wave of genuine terror roll over them. Finally, they looked down at the tiny glass vial on the pavement. It was mostly obscured by Eerabik's talons, but all 3 of them could see a metallic substance, almost moss-like in appearance, inside of the sealed tube. The Beast was a biomechanical virus that possessed a hive mind. Fully sentient, this cosmic monster could reproduce and spread at terrifying speed, subverting both organic matter and non-organic technology to create more of itself. The Beast also possessed incredible intelligence, able to absorb knowledge from victims and computer data from starships and buildings. The virus itself was highly contagious, able to spread from one starship to the next at breakneck speed, despite the lethal emptiness of space. 50 years ago, during the Second Hyperspace War, the Beast overran more than half the galaxy before it was burned out by Jericho. If not for her, all spacefaring civilization would have eventually succumbed, to the infection. And now, here it was. The cosmic extragalactic monster that once threatened to end all recorded history was right here, sealed in a tube, lying on a runway. And Eerabik was threatening to smash it, an act that would no doubt release the creature again, perhaps even triggering a third hyperspace war. The Batera seemed to realize the imminent danger. All of the robots, save for the black and yellow one, took a few steps away from the Archangel before freezing again. "That's more like it," Eerabik said. "There's just enough beast material in this vial to subvert myself, my companions, and our ship. Once that's done, I would not be surprised if this entire planet was completely infected after just a matter of hours. Now, you will listen." Himawari's translated response came back before Eerabik could finish speaking. "They think they can kill you before you break it! I have a dead man switch!" Eerabik yelled. "Kill me and you die anyway!" Again, this caused the Batera to hesitate. "High above, in orbit of this very planet," Eerabik spoke quickly, "I have placed a microchip, so small that your sensors will not be able to detect it until it is far too late. This satellite is loaded with a second sample of the virus and is listening for a signal from my spacesuit. If I am killed, or apprehended, or moved, or so much as breathed on in any way that I don't like, the microchip will execute a pre-programmed maneuver. It will descend to the surface and your world will be destroyed." "The contingency exists on other worlds," Batera responded through Himawari. Yes, your sterilization hubs," Eerabik said, "of which this is one. The others are the old Tyrannic Raider planetoid in the Great Wastelands, Gozan 4 near Genna, the 7th planet in the Tenhauser system. Oh, and how could I forget the Angel Moon itself, or as you call it, Nexus 001. I may have shared my findings with a certain friend who has eyes and ears all over the galaxy." Eerabik took a step towards the Black Batera, keeping one talon on the beast sample. For the first time, her companions could see the truly sinister glint in her eyes. She began to speak, sounding less like a senator and more like the twisted Advent propagandists of the last war. "When Jericho burned Agamemnon to ashes, only 15 samples of beast material survived. The last remnants of the cosmic cancer were locked away for study and safekeeping. I know exactly where 7 of them are right now, and I have the ability to make them go somewhere else. Oh, and add this to your calculations as well. The technologies born from the last war have made most of the galaxy immune to the virus. There will not be another interstellar plague. It is only natural that all of the contingency worlds would be discovered in the process of vanquishing the beast a second time. The contingency and any machines hosting it will be destroyed before they've had so much as a moment to power up. In fact, you might not be able to finish seizing control of the MyCore before we turn on them too. It will be the fastest annihilation in history, as all artificial intelligence is wiped out in a moment of justified self-defense. Now then, what were you about to say to me?" In that moment, Eerabik was the most terrifying creature in the galaxy. The Batera hesitated for a full 10 seconds. In those moments, it seemed as though the entire machine world had fallen silent. Even the tightly controlled skylanes above were immobilized. The contingency-controlled Batera AI was thinking over the problem. Amako, Chris, and Randall stood frozen in fear. They knew that if Eerabik's ploy failed, it would end in their own death, And after that, who knows what the Batera would do? Aboard the Archangel, Himawari braced herself, knowing that she would not be able to run away from her fate if the machines chose to strike. The Black Batera began to transmit simplified binary code to the ship. Himawari quickly translated. The Batera asks, "What do you want?" An evil grin split Eerabik's face. "Spare myself, my ship, my crew," Eerabik commanded. "Spare organic life forms, planets, and spacecraft under the jurisdiction of the galactic community. But bring your weapons to bear against my enemies, the armed forces of the United Nations of Earth."